Floyd House Flicks. Welcome to Blacks in Cinema Sunday, where we discuss black actors in film. I'm glad you could join me today. Today's film was, of course, Lady Sings the Blues, 1972, starring uh, Diana Ross and Billy D. Williams, Richard Pryor. Some faces, if you've ever seen the movie, some faces you might be more familiar with, like Isabel Sanford, who played Louise Jefferson from The Jeffersons, of course. Scatman Crothers, he was a 60s and 70s fixture in black film and television. Huge, huge. Um, and of course, Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor, what more can you say about Richard Pryor? What can't you say about Richard Pryor? He played a character named Piano Man. I believe he was nominated for his work in this movie. Phenomenal, just coming out. A very dramatic actor, quite the departure from his normal routine. He was nominated for his dramatic acting. Could you imagine? Richard Pryor also played a dramatic role in a movie called Blue Collar. Check it out if you get a chance. Very dramatic role. Richard Pryor flexing his acting chops, if you will. Lady Sings the Blues was executive produced by Berry Gordy. Berry Gordy, of course, the head of Motown Records. Motown Records was where the actress that portrayed Billie Holiday in this movie was Diana Ross. Diana Ross was signed to Motown Records back then. The film was directed by Sidney Furie, and I guess we could just start by saying this film um, was very dark. It was very dark in this respect that back in the days, and currently as well, this happens in this day and age too, with people and addiction and most people in these days, it's opiates. It's always been opiates, it seems. Opiates have always played a role in music entertainment, no matter what it is. Um, Anything in the public eye, people say that they imbibe in opiates in order to be creative or maintain a level of control and calm because things are so hectic. But as someone who's not ever had a relationship, personal relationship with addiction, I don't know how to relate to that. All I can do is be an observer. But this movie was very it was very dark. It started with a young Billie Holiday. Her name wasn't her name wasn't actually Billie Holiday. That's not her birth name. That was her stage name. Um, Excuse me a second. We'll move forward. Uh, she was a young girl from Pittsburgh, if I'm not mistaken, and she went to live with her aunt in the city, and her aunt lived in an area where they had brothels. And brothels, of course, are what they call houses of ill repute, where people go to do things that aren't necessarily of note. Let's put it like that. She was 14 years old, and she would be in these brothels with the care, not so much with the caregiver. The caregiver, again, lived up the way, but she was always curious about what went on at these houses of ill repute. And one of the madams, played by Isabel Sanford, would let her come by the house. She wouldn't do anything. She was 14 years old. She wouldn't involve her in anything, according to this. Um, Her birth name was Eleanor Fagan. She was born in on April 7th, 1915, and she was always surrounded by music. She was always captivated by music. So eventually, she would get into the music game by going to the what they call the juke joints in the area. The juke joints is where mostly in black communities where the nightlife was at for music and gambling and drinking and all sorts of that sort of thing. So she would go to places like that as a child, 14-year-old, and she would always try to dress herself up so she could pass for an older person so she could hang out, but she'd always wind up getting kicked out. So eventually, she wound up getting into the sex trade. According to what's documented, don't know that's accurate, but according to what's documented, she wound up getting into the sex trade briefly just so she could make extra money, so she could make money. She didn't have a job, so she could make money and she could try to. She was working at the brothels. She was working at the brothels at first as a washerwoman. A washerwoman is the ones they go up and they clean up after the prostitute and the John connect. They clean up afterward. That's a yeah. So eventually, as she's in that environment, she winds up getting into the sex trade temporarily. So she does what she does, and then she goes back to the juke joints. Now she's in the juke joints as representing as an older person, as a more mature woman, even though she's still quite young. But she would go into these juke joints and see all these people and just try to blend in. And eventually, who walks in? But Billy D. Williams' character, his name was Louis McKay. Louis McKay was a numbers runner, but he was a good dude. He was just a numbers runner, and he was well known in the town, well known with the ladies. And it's oddly enough, in one of the scenes where he walks into the juke joint, he walks in with a yet unknown. I don't even think she got credit for this in that movie. Jane Kennedy. My friend, if you do not know who Jane Kennedy is, please look her up. Jane Kennedy was one of the finest black women. I'll rephrase. She was just one of the finest women that I had ever seen in my life. Jane Kennedy, uncredited in Lady Sings the Blues. There's a scene where she's walking down the steps with Louis McKay, Billy D. Williams. She's walking down the steps with him. Gorgeous. That said, she tries to get a job. Billie Holiday tries to get a job at one of the juke joints as a performer. Of course, she likes to sing. She can't dance a lick. The owner of the establishment was looking for dancers. She tried to dance. She cut the fool, and it didn't work for her. But Piano Man, played by Richard Pryor, encouraged her to do something else. He says, "Can you sing?" She says, "Yeah, I can sing," but he ain't trying to see me after what I just did. He's like, "I'm gonna play music, just sing." And he vouched for her and started playing music, and she sang for this establishment owner who was then trapped into her styling and into her voice. He immediately bought in and he hired her. So she's at this juke joint dancing and not dancing, but singing at night, entertaining. They pass out money. It's not like a strip club or anything where they pass out money. But back in the day, I guess when the performers would perform, they would walk by the tables and people would just literally give them money, just hand them dollars and fives, just hand them money, which was impressive. I bet people do that now. They would. But as it progressed, and as in most cases, when entertainers get into the throes of the entertainment industry, they meet people that introduce them to the darker side of the entertainment industry. Now, I have seen many people within the entertainment industry that were drug abusers, many of them, whether they were actors or singers or whatever they were within the entertainment industry and had their own addictions that they were dealing with. And again, I say, or according to what's said, this is by the people that deal with the addictions. This helps them cope with reality. It helps them to be creatives within that reality. Everybody needs an excuse as to why, they do the things they do. And I'm not here to judge that. I know most of those people, they just need help. And if you know anything about drug addiction, you can't help the ones that are not willing to be helped as much as you might want to. You can't help those who don't want help. So they have to fight through that. We've lost many, many great musicians in the way of drug addiction. I mean, especially in the music era in jazz and things like that. Some of the great old great jazz musicians, Charlie Parker, Chet Baker, Fats Navarro, Freddie Webster, Bud Powell, who was an alcoholic and he died of cirrhosis of the liver. All the others had issues with heroin, and we all know that heroin was a massive, massive killer of our people in the entertainment industry, not just black people. I won't say just our people. It killed a lot of people. There were a lot of people that lost their lives through the scourge, by the scourge of heroin. A lot. Um, and it's very, and these are people that have left a massive legacy of music and art in their wake because they could not negotiate their addictions. And that, to me, I get it's very disheartening. It's very upsetting to um, to think of those things. But before we go further into that, let's go back to Billie, who was very groundbreaking. She was the first black woman to go on tour with an all-white band. She was the first. And this was like, when I say the first, I mean 1938 first. That type of first. She was groundbreaking. She was bold. She would fight a dude. Billie Holiday had a lot of heart, and she wasn't no sucker. She was no chump by no means. She was no chump, but she was still taken advantage of by that monster, that machine, that industry, that the accoutrements that go along with the things within that industry. Of course, someone within it has to introduce them to these just monsters of addiction issues. They're introduced to it. She had songs like God Bless the Child, All of Me, In My Solitude, just hit records, making wonderful music. And then this is where things start to get sketchy. Um, she had a song called Strange Fruit. Strange Fruit was a song about lynching that rubbed all the wrong people the wrong way. Um, People in power could not understand why she would perform a song that created such anguish and got such a response from the black community. She didn't like it. I mean, they did not like it. In fact, there was a movie not too long ago, I think it was on Netflix, US versus Billy Idol, United States Billy Idol, United States versus Billie Holiday. And they went as far as saying J. Edgar Hoover would come at her because of the song Strange Fruit. She had gotten arrested for singing the song Strange Fruit because of the emotion it incited and the way that people in power felt that it was going to stir up the blacks. This is a term that was often used in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. And now, let's keep it a buck. Stir up the blacks. Strange Fruit was a song about lynching and black bodies hanging from trees. Strange Fruit. A lot of people aren't familiar with that. A lot of people don't know that, but that's what that song is all about. And it was pushed to the point where she was not allowed to perform that song at her shows, where she was threatened with arrest. She was threatened with all sorts of things. Now, she's dealing with her addiction as an entertainer, dealing with her addiction. She would continue to perform Strange Fruit. Then all of a sudden, she started to get arrested for the drugs. People say because she wouldn't stop Strange Fruit, she would stop performing Strange Fruit, that the powers that be went after her. And again, I said Billie Holiday was not a joke. So she didn't give a shit. In her words, she didn't give a shit. So she would perform that song and perform that song, and kind of similar to when um, you see movies about like NWA where they can't perform F the Police because the police are saying that this is inciting riots within the black community against law enforcement. That's what the police said. So it was a, and they would go and they would perform these songs. This is what would happen throughout the industry when they had something that was twisting skin that was causing people to be uncomfortable. They would do it on purpose because this is what kind of needs to be said in some cases. And in the 50s, of course, Strange Fruit, 40s and 50s, Strange Fruit, people being lynched, black people being lynched in the United States was a definite conversation. So it did make people uncomfortable. So people wound up going after her, and then she got arrested several times. She was detoxing. They went to get her while she was detoxing because of her activities, and they said they were arresting her because of the drugs. Why would you arrest someone for drugs if they're at a rehabilitation center? Where does the sense come from with that? I don't know. But that's not what it was about. So that's why there is no sense. She was being targeted because of the strange fruit conversation. So there's that. In the film, after she got out of prison, she was, I'm sure this was in real life too, because after she got out of prison is when she was slowly starting to decide to leave the music industry altogether because it was too much for her. And she had a man with her, the Billy D. Williams character, Louis McKay, who was helping her through all of this. But as she was encouraged to go back with moderation, of course, people to be with her to make sure that everything was everything, there's always a slip up. So they go on this tour because they want Billy to get back into the game. They promise her a gig at New York City's Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall, the biggest of the big, the greatest of the great. This is where opera singers perform at. This is where all things art, musically, entertainment wise, are done at. So this was a big deal. So her management told her, go on tour. I need you to go on tour for a few months because this is the thing I skipped. After she was arrested for the drug incident, she lost her cabaret license. She was not able to perform. You have to have a cabaret license to perform in different venues. She was not allowed to perform because of her drug arrest. They're saying it was because of her drug arrest that she lost her license. Do you know that if every musician that was arrested for drugs lost their cabaret license, there would have been nothing? Sadly, Ray Charles was arrested because of his drug use. He didn't lose his licensing. He was able to, once he got his act together, he was able to go perform and do whatever he needed to do. All these jazz musicians that were arrested because of their drug use, just because of their drug use, it was never a threat of them losing their license to perform. She was stripped of that. So in she would like in New York City, she could not perform in New York City anywhere. So that's why her management told her, go on tour. I need you to go different places and perform. You know, New York is the mecca, one of the meccas of entertainment. So if you can't perform in New York, you're dead. And that's just how it was at the time. It's kind of like, it's almost like that now, but that's just how it was. So she would have to go outside of New York to perform. So she did a whole tour and she was clean the whole tour. And when they get to California, all of a sudden she starts to get the itch. And Piano Man, played by Richard Pryor, promises her, he says, I can get you something, but I don't want to do it. She says, well, fine, I'll go do it myself. And that's when, he's conflicted because he doesn't want her to get high anymore, but she says, whether you help me or not, I'm getting high. So I guess he was trying to be responsible for it and for her. So he went to what he called his connection. She gave him her wedding ring, said, here's my ring. Pawn it, go get some money, go get some stuff. We'll come back and go get the ring. He says, okay. So he takes the ring. He goes and meets up with some folks, comes back with some drugs. They get high. Next thing you know, there's a bang on the door. They bang on the door. They open up the door. It's the drug dealers. The drug dealers say, you ran off with our dope, with our drugs. You were supposed to come back. You didn't come back. You can't steal from us. And they commenced beating him to death in front of Billy. Don't know if this actually happened. Don't know if this was just for dramatic effect. But in reality, this happens. You don't mess with the dope man's money. Any fool knows that. So it's just something that happened in the film. So with that, Billy was down again, but her husband at the time, Louis McKay, was able to get her back on her feet. They got the call that after all the touring that they did, Carnegie Hall was willing to give her a shot to perform in New York, but she still didn't have a cabaret's license, so she couldn't perform smaller venues, but she could perform in Carnegie Hall. She went to Carnegie Hall, turned it out. Award, award, award. They did all of this to be able to go to the licensing bureau to get her cabaret's license back so she could perform again. All for naught. She was never able to get her cabaret's license again. The government, the city, the state, none of them allowed her to get her cabaret's license because, and this is just what they say, it's probably true, strange fruit. They knew that she was going to continue to perform that song and it was going to be a problem. So they blocked her from being able to support herself and survive. Eventually, she wound up falling back into drugs and got rearrested. After she got rearrested, she got really sick. Really, really sick. And she wound up in the hospital. And they say it was a pulmonary embolism due to cirrhosis of the liver that on July 17th, 1959, Billie Holiday died in the hospital. Some stories tell it slightly differently. Some stories tell it that when Billie Holiday died in the hospital, she was handcuffed to the bed because she had gotten arrested. So she's in bed with handcuffs on, and it was told that she was not being provided the medical care that was necessary to help to keep her alive. It was told that J. Edgar Hoover and his people got in the way of her and her care in the hospital. So it was said. I can't prove any of this. This is just the conversation that goes on. And who are we kidding? We know that there were a lot of people that did not like to hear African Americans speak to injustice and speak to wrongdoing that was perpetrated on them by the people that run this country. I mean, it was what it was. Not only the people that are running this country, but people who are representing the people that are running this country. Let's keep it a buck. So these are the things that were experienced by African Americans in America. You had to keep quiet. You had to keep quiet. Keep your mouth shut and you'll be all right. Crazy talk, right? So how do you exist in a world where it's okay for people to do bad to you, but you can't say anything about it? That's crazy talk. So hence where we are today, where you see this shouldn't, I'm going to have this dialogue here. I'm going to have this conversation here because I'm not saying anything that's a lie when I speak to wrongdoings or mistreatments, or when something is happening in front of us in real time and recorded and displayed and treated as if it didn't happen. That's a problem. So without going too much further into that conversation, there was a lot of fear when it came to the influence that Billie Holiday had as an entertainer. Most entertainers have a lot of influence, but when they decide to become invested in their people and to stay, just speak to things that are wrong. Anybody that is angry at something that is spoken to that is wrong is dealing with something else. We all make mistakes. We all have moments of weakness where we have missteps. We all do things sometimes maybe in the wrong spirit. But you always get the opportunity to correct it, readdress it, fix it. And if somebody calls you on it, you'd be like, yes, that's what happened. You're right. You're absolutely right. I wish it didn't happen that way. Let's move forward. This is the thing. Let's move forward in a direction where things like this will never happen again. I will guarantee I will have no part in anybody being mistreated or misrepresented or any of those things from this day forward. That is the catalyst for change, responsibility. We're not telling you to own your ancestors' mistakes. We're telling you to own the future. Own what's coming. Own what's coming. Own what the possibility of our futures are. Fix the mistakes that were made. You can. It's not your mistake, but you can fix it. I've done it too many times. I've fixed plenty of people's mistakes. We're parents. As parents, you fix people's mistakes all the time. You have to address certain things. It is what it is. Be accountable. You didn't do it, but can you do anything to fix it? There we are. This is where we land. So, Billie Holiday, Lady Sings the Blues, Diana Ross. This was a film that, if you've never seen it before, check it out. Diana Ross did a magnificent job, in my opinion, of this film. This film was nominated for like Academy Awards, several Academy Awards. I don't think it won, but it was nominated for several Academy Awards. I'll read this really quick. The essence of Billie Holiday, one of America's most loved and memorable blues singers, is captured brilliantly in a tour de force debut performance by singer Diana Ross, filled with the great songs of the incomparable Lady Day. This stunning film biography received 5 Academy Award nominations, including Diana Ross for Best Actress, also starring Billy Dee Williams and Richard Pryor. 5 Academy Award nominations. It was a big deal at the time. I did not know that that was her acting debut. And then there's that. So this has been, I am thirsty. This has been Black. I'm having a moment here because Blacks in Cinema Sunday, I've had conversations with people about Blacks in Cinema Sunday, just in the vein of, do you think if you called it something else that it would bring more people to the show? And I don't think we need to change the name to do that. Generally, I am speaking from a place of just history and things that, with the way that things that have happened in history affect me and people like me. So I think that we can have a civil conversation about those types of things. My voice and my throat is very dry, but I need to go and get something to drink. I'm going to wrap this up. Blacks in Cinema Sunday, next Sunday. We're going to do this again. I don't know what film we're going to pick, but we're going to pick it. Please be there. Please remember, Floyd House Flicks. We're still getting good subscribers going on. I appreciate you guys. Check us out, Blacks in Cinema Sunday next week, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to pick a film. I don't know what it is, but once I do, you'll be the first to know. All right, guys, you take care. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. God bless and be well. Peace.